Jack Barsky, welcome to the show.
Hey, greetings to Milwaukee. I've been there once, so I'm there virtually. Glad to be here.
A few years ago, I was thinking about starting a podcast. I've always been a big fan of podcasts. I just like the format. I like being able to listen when I want to listen to, like a show. And I heard you on the Jordan Harbinger show. And I thought to myself, man, I have got to, if I ever have a podcast, I want this guy. He's like at the top of my list of guests. And here we are. So I can't thank you enough for being here.
You're welcome. It took a while, but and I feel honored that you remembered me.
I have a very, Jack, I've got a very odd memory. I don't remember algebra or chemistry when I was in high school, but I'm great at music trivia. There's certain things that like stick in my head, and podcasts and the guests, they just do. That's the way it is. But your book, Deep Undercover: My Secret Life and Tangled Allegiances as a KGB Spy in America, I just got done reading that, and I got the audio version because I consume most of my books in audio. I'm at the gym, I'm driving, whatever. And first off, fantastic book. It's the type of book where you don't want to put it down. And it wasn't just about like spy stuff. It was also, you're a human being and the stuff that you've gone through. And I just think it's a good book on a lot of different levels. But one thing that popped out at me right away was a quote that you said, and it is, "Caution is a spy's best friend. Paranoia is his enemy." Could you kind of explain that a little bit?
That's interesting you picked that up because my daughter, we were talking about quotes, and she says, there's a famous quote out there on the internet, and it's exactly the one that you just mentioned.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, caution means that, you have to anticipate things go wrong. And I was really very good at projecting, possibly, stuff that would not be good for me. And so I have this reputation, particularly I have a tendency to sometimes talk it out loud in front of my wife. And so she drew the conclusion that I'm a negative guy. It's not true, not at all. I'm just ruminating out loud, and I'm the reason that I'm doing this is to prevent exactly that from happening. It's foresight. But when that degrades into fear and then paranoia, you achieve the exact opposite. Because if fear is, in my view, the worst motivator any person could have for doing things, other than if there's real imminent danger, then fear is appropriate. But if you're driven by fear and it becomes paranoia, you will fail.
So how do you find that sweet spot between the two? Is it your training? Is it your experience?
No training. That's a tough one to put in words. It's an attitude thing. Fundamentally, your attitude should be that you will not fail. Right?
Yeah, I totally see that. And I think that's transferable to not just being a spy,
yes,
but, everyday life. And yeah, as being a cop, for over 25 years, I think the same quote would be very, very good, especially for new people. It's like, caution is very, very important. You have to be careful because you're put in very dangerous situations. But if you're constantly paranoid about these situations, you're going to freeze. Bad things are going to happen.
Oh yeah, in your profession, you might get spooked and shoot at an innocent civilian because they pulled something out that looked like a gun.
Right.
Wasn't a gun, wasn't even directed at you. That's when paranoia sets in, and that's that is really, really bad. And I've seen this in I spent quite some time in corporate America, and at that level, failure is not it is not, for the most part, a real danger to you. But failure, if you're afraid of failure, you won't make decisions. If you don't make decisions, you won't get anywhere, and eventually, that's a career limiting attitude. So, as you said, it applies to people at all levels and in all walks of life.
Yeah, that jumped out at me when, I actually stopped the book. I was listening, I was in the gym actually. I stopped the book and I had to write it down. Well, I had my phone, so I typed it like in the notes, and I'm just like, I got to ask Jack about this. This is great. I love this quote. That's awesome. All right, so let's set the context. We'll start at the beginning. You were born in East Berlin post World War II. Probably one of the most bleakest times. I think that's a word that kind of popped out in my head for, in Germany's history, or maybe not its history, but it would be very bleak. No bathrooms, rationed food. Could you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, correction. It wasn't East Berlin. That would have, in that case, I would have grown up in amongst a bunch of rubble. I mean,
okay, East Germany.
The East German cities were destroyed like no other city because when there were the Allied bombings that happened, and then the Soviet army marched through East Germany, and they didn't take any prisoners. They just they were ruthless and you got to understand why. Because the Germans had just inflicted phenomenal damage, killed millions of people, and on the Germans on their retreat, that was they followed the command called Scorch Earth. So they destroyed anything of value as they could leaving. So as they left the Soviet Union, that was nothing but a pile of rubble. And the East German cities were, handled, had the same fate. I grew up in the country, which was, in a sense, was a blessing, because there wasn't much to destroy in the country. As a matter of fact, the second building that I lived in was a small school building, and there were some bullet marks on the walls, but as I did research, I was told that the Soviet army just went right through there, and they shot a few places, but really there wasn't much to destroy. So having said that, 4 years after the war, the end of the war, there was massive poverty. What was actually beneficial growing up in the country, there was some food available because we had farmers, and you could trade with farmers, or you would just ask them, can we have something? So I can't remember ever having gone hungry, but I also don't have good memories of having eaten good food until maybe the age of 7, 8. I give you one example, or two examples. They were both told to me by my mother. One day, my father found a silk parachute in the woods. He took it home, and my mother cut it up and made underwear for us because she couldn't get it in the store.
Wow.
And the other one, she told me that because food was in short supply, she would take one egg and stretched it to make a meal for 3 people. Now, I never asked her what she stretched it with,
right?
I didn't want to hear the answer. So it was pretty lousy. Yes, food was rationed. The rations were below the level that below maintenance level for adults, and so I grew up physically like malnutritioned. I shot up really quick, so my organs didn't catch up. It was a struggle, but we didn't know it was a struggle,
right?
Because that was our reality.
Sure, sure. So both of your parents were school teachers, correct?
Yes, they were recruited and went through very fast. I think it was about a 6 month course to get ready to teach because in East Germany the denazification uh, was very radical, and they threw out all the teachers that had any connection with the Nazi Party, with and there were quite a few. So they brought
Mm,
in fresh blood,
okay.
and so that's how they became teachers. Now they picked people who had uh, higher education. My mother actually she graduated from high school, and my father was a couple of months away from graduating from high school. That was not normal in those days for Germany.
Okay. Now for you, you're a smart cookie. I'm reading this book and
Mhm.
you were picked to go, everybody can go to like grammar school or middle school.
Yeah, yep.
And then they more or less picked who goes to college. Am I correct with that?
Uh, yeah, indirectly. The the majority of kids
Or high school.
got it.
Maybe I shouldn't
Got
skip
it.
that, but
Yeah,
as far as high school goes.
the majority of kids got a 10-year education, and after year 8, the top 15% of us were selected to go to a 4-year high school and then graduate from high school, which guaranteed you pretty much admission to a college or university.
Oh, okay. Now what happened with the greater majority? They went off to like tech schools, or how did that work?
Yeah, they got technical training, and they could. There was a path to even for them to eventually wind up with a college degree, but uh, that took a little longer. They had to
Okay.
go to some special schools if they showed the willingness and the determination to actually go a little further.
Now, I'm one thing that jumped out at me when I was reading the book or listening to the book was college, and maybe I got this wrong. You had chemistry classes that were like 6 in the morning till like 11 o'clock at night or
Well, not
something.
quite like it, but you're onto something here. In our first year, the first lecture started at 7 in the morning.
Okay.
Then we had lectures and small classes uh, until lunchtime. In the afternoon, there was lab, and then we had independent reading to do. So my weekday really ended at 11 because there was a lot of reading to be done and
Mm-hmm.
lab reports to write. So they really threw the kitchen sink at us. That compared to high school, this was murderous. And we later on we came to the conclusion that this was done deliberately because they wanted to weed out the weak. And of the 80 that started the first year, 60 survived,
Okay.
and almost all of them went all the way to graduation.
Wow. Okay. Now you were a chemistry major and you were more or less
Yes,
on track of on track to being a chemistry professor, if I remember correctly.
yes. This was my dream, and because I had like excellent grades, and I was active in the communist youth movement.
That was the Young
I
Pioneers, correct?
No, the youth
No.
movement that was the free, I think Free Democratic Youth it was called.
Okay.
That was the that was past the Young Pioneers.
Oh, okay.
You could join that once you were in high school, and
Hmm.
it continued until pretty much until the end of your college. Um, and because I was the best uh, student in my year, and one of the best in the entire university, it was a no-brainer that I could expect to have a career as a college professor, which would have required to get my doctorate and then operate as an assistant professor
Hmm.
and eventually get a tenured professorship. Those were very rare, but I was convinced I would get it. I was already somebody in my third and fourth year at university. I already contributed to the leadership of what was called the section chemistry as a representative of the student body. So, yeah, that was a given.
Okay, what did the doctorate of, like, say, communism look like when you were in college? How much was that forced? Was there a lot of like anti-US propaganda, capitalism is evil, that kind of stuff? What did that look like?
Well, that was a given. Now we did actually get really good hardcore scientific training. I learned my critical thinking in a communist high school and a communist university. Which is interesting because nowadays in this country, critical thinking is not necessarily always part of the curriculum. That's just a dichotomy I wanted to point out. However, there was always this element of indoctrination from, pretty much kindergarten on through elementary, middle school, high school, university. Mm-hmm. There were things. Obviously, when you're in kindergarten, you don't talk about history. But once there was history that was being taught. There was German literature that had ideology and indoctrination in it, and then there was this special, at least once a week, training in Marxist, Leninist philosophy, and the world, and the class struggle, and yes, indeed, that how the U.S. was evil and how the U.S. was supporting the neo-Nazis in West Germany, who were going to come and invade us. So we were really steeped in ideology, but very difficult to escape that as a young person.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in your college years is when you should be most open to different ways of thinking. That's when you should. That's when you should be looking at, have a great deal of empathy, and you should be looking at every side of every argument. And now, this cancel culture and just universities aren't these free thinking places anymore, and I think that's really dangerous. That's a slippery slope. No matter what side you're on, that just isn't right.
You're 100% right. See, if your belief system is fundamentally formed by an ideology, you are bound to misfire at one point, because right. you get to a point where you're not flexible, where we're not open to new ideas or things that are contrary to what you thought to believe in, and no, as you just said, it doesn't matter what. Let's talk about politics. What end of the political spectrum you're coming from? It doesn't matter. Ideology is not good for you.
Yeah, I think it makes you a more whole person. Also, if you know all the different sides of the argument and you can make an informed decision on facts, well, that just makes you a better person, I believe. But hey, that's just me. So you're on the fast track. You have a very you have a bright future in academia. You're looking at being a college professor, and you're getting better grades than everybody else. Where were you personally, as far as, like, I think in the book is that when you had a girlfriend and you're thinking like future plans ahead with?
I just want to point out what tenured professorship meant in East Germany. When you started working as a assistant professor, your salary was 800 marks. Tenured professors pulled in 4,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, so boy. There's
truly elite. And so I was looking forward to that. Now that 4,000 marks couldn't buy you a whole lot of things, but that's besides the point.
Right.
Personally, I had my puppy love, my first love, started at 16 in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I threw myself at this girl. She dumped me once and I got her back. And I knew I was going to get married to her.
Okay.
It was a given. She was a goddess. She was my all. I in my junior year in high school, I started actually working because up until then I just did, I didn't study. Started studying because I wanted to impress her with getting all A's, which I did.
Okay.
So I dedicated all the A's to her. I mean, this was like
so there's our motivation. Excellent.
Misplaced passion.
Okay.
And ultimately, I never really found out. I didn't discuss it with her when I met her again, not too long ago. I think I scared the holy bejesus out of her with that passion. And so when she had a chance to cut the cord after we went to college, she went to Berlin, and I went to a city called Jena, and the distance between the two isn't that bad, but in those days the time it took to go from one place to another was about 12 hours. So we were isolated from each other.
Sure.
And so she just broke up with me in a letter, and boy, I was devastated. I mean, if I had had any suicidal tendency in me, I would have killed myself. It was that bad.
Okay.
But I didn't kill myself, and I just threw myself into studies. Now here, you go to college, and there's social life. We had a student club where there were dances on a Saturday night. There were pretty girls all over the place. I just didn't have. I was like, I had blinders on. I focused on studying like a maniac. The first time I dated a girl again was I think 2.5 years after I entered the university, and that wasn't serious. None of that was serious because I got burned so badly I didn't want to commit to anybody.
Sure, I get it. So fast forward a little bit. You're on track. You're the A, student. You're at the top of your class. You have a bright future. And then there was a knock on your door that changed your life.
Yeah.
Could you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I was towards the end of my third year studying chemistry. The dorm room that I occupied, I shared with with one person, but he usually went home on weekends. So I was sitting there on a Saturday early afternoon with a bunch of paper in front of me and studying, and there's a knock on the door. And so here's the interesting thing. Anybody who was an occupant of that dorm, if they went to go to another room, they would knock, and that indicated I'm coming in, and then they would open the door.
Okay.
There was a knock, and the door didn't open. So immediately I knew there was a stranger. So I waited a little bit, and then I said, "Come on in." And in walks a short guy with he had a cast on his right hand, and he had a face that only his mother must have liked.
Okay.
He just was not a pleasant-looking individual. He had like a long peaked nose, and the word that came up in my mind was weasel.
Okay.
He was one of there was one other guy who I didn't like of the folks I interacted with that were in the KGB or were associated with the KGB, and he was the one in the first one. And he also started talking. He asked me who I was, whether I was Albrecht Dittrich, and I said yes. Interestingly enough, as you indicated, I was a really, really fast-thinking fella, and I knew that for him to find me, he had to have connections.
Sure.
Because there were no name tags on the door, so somebody must have told me where I was. And so I already indicated, I thought to myself, that has to be Stasi, East German secret police. the KGB idea never even occurred to me. And we started to make some small talk, and eventually he asked the question what I'm thinking of doing once I graduate, because he said he was from Carl Zeiss Jena, which was and still is an optical factory that was actually producing some highly competitive stuff. So it was one of the few top-notch factories in East Germany. And so he thought that was a good cover story. It wasn't, because in those days, companies did not recruit at universities. The guy was like totally not informed. It was
okay.
As bad a cover story he could have come up with, because in those days, the top tier of students upon graduation had a choice. Like, I would have chosen to stay at the university, and no questions asked. But as soon as you get to you get past the top half a dozen, everybody else was assigned. There was no choices.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so and I played along with him, and eventually he changed the story, and he said, I wasn't telling you the truth. I'm really from the government.
And he was saying this in your first initial meeting, or later on?
No, this is the first meeting.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised
from
you
the
just
government.
Okay.
So I could have really put him into a bind by asking him, what part of the government are you in?
Right. Yeah. Are you with transportation? I mean, what are you?
Yeah. But, so then I let it go, and then he asked, could you envision yourself one day to work for the government? And obviously, so I answered the question that he didn't ask. I said, yes, but not as a chemist. So I sensed that this was an attempt to recruit me for something like espionage, not internally for some reason, because internally they wouldn't be as cautious. This was all feelings and based on my understanding how society worked in those days.
Right.
And so he got the answer that he wanted, even though he didn't ask the question.
Okay.
And so the next thing was he invited me to, have a meal with him at the #1 restaurant in town. And so, yeah, that was great. Is it okay to continue here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so typically in Germany, you would eat your big meal around lunchtime. So it may have been 1 o'clock. I walk into the restaurant, and I remember the table where he sat was in far back. And
his back was to the wall?
I don't know. I believe not. He was on the left. It was a table with 4 chairs. He was on the left, and another fellow was sitting facing me. And I was a little hesitant as to whether I should approach the table, because the other guy could have been a stranger. In East Germany in those days, there were very often not enough seats in restaurants, so people had no problem, sharing a table.
Okay.
So you would just ask, is the seat taken? No. Okay, then you sit down. So I walked there rather slowly, but my man gets up and he comes towards me and says, come on, I want to introduce you to Herman. We're cooperating with our Soviet friends. And 1, 2, 3, I was with the KGB.
Wow.
Totally unexpected. And this weasel guy said, I leave you to talk. I gotta go. He said goodbye. I never knew his name. He didn't even introduce him with a cover name. He just disappeared. He was the one who brought the fish on land, and now the KGB was going to cook it.
Okay, so you more or less have this informal interview, I guess, for lack of better words, with another KGB agent. And
yeah, it was a talk. We were in a restaurant. We would not even bring up the subject of espionage. We were just doing small talk.
Okay, so how did that morph into you going into the KGB? How did that happen?
Well, the next meeting was in his car.
Okay.
And from then on, we met for several months. I can't recall how long. I would, he would park his vehicle someplace at the edge of the city where there was no traffic, and I would walk there and make sure that nobody that I know was in the area, and sit down in his car, and we would talk. And at that point, the obviously subject of espionage came up, but very slowly, very carefully. He really wanted to get to know me. For instance, my attitude towards women came up, and I was very, I was in those days, and I still am, but in those days I was naively honest. I shared everything with them. I was an open book, and nowadays I know that as soon as the meeting was over, he would drive to his office and write a report, because there's the fellow who actually saw somebody who worked at KGB archives, who saw the number of binders that were in my files, and it was a half a dozen.
Oh, wow.
So lots of reporting. Anyway, he gave me some tasks. Then he gave me some reports to write. My friend and I once hitchhiked all the way through several countries, all the way down to Bulgaria, and he asked me to write a report as to what I saw there. He also gave me some other tasks to, go and explore a building and find out what's in there. What are the activities? What kind of a company?
At this point, did you know it was KGB?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you knew it was.
Right away.
What was your incentive to kind of go towards that instead of staying on track and becoming a professor? What was going on inside your head?
Well, there's multiple incentives here, multiple reasons to go to at least explore this.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure I was going to do it at that time. No.
Oh, so you weren't 100% sold on this yet?
Oh no! I had to find out. It was a mutual feeling out. They had to figure out whether I was the right candidate, and I had to find out whether I would want to do this. But eventually, so here was, if it's a scale, on this one side was my career. There was my family. My family was my basketball team. Okay. I had a passion for basketball. That was number one in my life in those days. And on the other side, there were a number of things. First of all, when you're recruited by the KGB, that's big time. That wasn't just Stasi. It was KGB, the most powerful intelligence organization in the history of mankind. So that was a lot of flattery. Number two, if I knew that if I signed up, I could travel, and I could travel not only east and south, but west. Okay, big thing, because Germans like to travel.
Okay.
There's a German word called Wanderlust, which means the joy of traveling, so to speak. Number three, I knew that that I would, if I were recruited and I signed up, I would be outside of the law. and I was always a contrarian. I was disciplined because I knew I had to be, but I really didn't want to be told what to do.
Okay.
And then there was a lot of propaganda. We had our own James Bond, and East German James Bond, and there were Russians. So there were these stories about the heroes, the spies. Fiction was fiction, but there was also nonfiction. But the fiction was really what I thought was real, And so we had this TV series where the hero would spy around in West Germany He would, lived a fast life. He would womanize. I mean, and just do good things in the process. So this was all when you add it all up, it was like 51 to eventually say yes, I'm doing it, and 49 I'm not.
Okay.
It was close, but I made the decision when I was asked one time. I had to I had a trip to Berlin where I spent 3 weeks with another guy, and he then took me to headquarters in uh, Berlin, and I believe that the head of the KGB in East Germany interviewed me and then asked me point blank, "So what? Are you in or not?" And I wasn't prepared for that question. So I played for time, and I said a few things. I said, I'm not trained and this and that. I can't make a decision now. And the guy said, we would like a decision by tomorrow noon, because people that are working with us need to be decisive. So I spent a sleepless night.
Sure.
I was still weighing to see which part of the scale would go down. And as I said, the yes won, and so that is when I officially joined the KGB.
Now, do you think there'd be ramifications or something negative coming your way if you said no?
Absolutely
at that
not.
point? No, okay.
No, and the reason for that is you can't force somebody into doing something like this. It won't work.
Okay.
The individuals who sign up for that have to be all in and volunteers. If there's any doubt that the other way, the first chance they would get, they would take a hike, or they would be much more vulnerable to recruitment as a double agent. No, it's that I never had the feeling that there was any pressure.
Okay, gotcha. So now you said yes. Now you're all in with the KGB. What did the training look like?
It was unlike what people think. It was all one-on-one. So here's the reason for that. I was going to be what you know. I became a person who took on a different ID. I became a different person, and people like us were extremely valuable to the KGB. So we had to be kept. We were. Let me rephrase it. The moment I signed up for the KGB, I became a Soviet state secret. In other words, very few people should know about me. And so the training was all one-on-one.
Okay, so there was no spy school that you went to or
there
anything
was no
like that?
spy, not at all.
Okay.
I had a handler, a liaison, who did some basic training with me, like some basic tradecraft, and then I would be taught by specialists, Morse code, encryption, decryption, photography, and in Berlin, most of those folks spoke German, and we did the training in German. And then I did another 2 years in Moscow, and in Moscow I needed an interpreter because those guys spoke only Russian. Everything was one-on-one, with the exception that if I needed a translator, my the respective liaison handler was there. But and here's one more thing. Here's an interesting thing. I met. I'm friends with somebody who escaped from the Russian Secret Service, the FSB, and he told me that it was very likely that the person who made decisions about me did not know me, never met me, only knew my cover name. So ultimately, there were maybe only 2-3 individuals who knew who I was.
Wow. Okay. Now, were you instructed as like you couldn't tell like a girlfriend or your mom what you're doing? Obviously, everything has to be a secret, correct?
No. From day one, my interaction with the KGB was a secret. I did not talk to anybody about this. I had to make my own decisions. I couldn't ask for advice. It's interesting. If I had had a functioning father figure, I might have actually confided in him. But my father had disappeared from my life, and I didn't have a mentor. So never once did I even hint at what my future might be like.
So what did you tell your mom or your friends? What were you doing? Like, how you're occupying your time?
Well, as long as I was in Jena, there was no change. I was 1 year, I was already an assistant professor, and I was still working with this Herman guy. When I moved to Berlin, we came up with a cover story that I would be in training to join the diplomatic service of East Germany. My mother was a little incredulous when I told her my brother was actually there as well. It must have been around Christmas, and I told her that was changing careers. She was very much surprised because her dream was for me to become one of those professor types.
Sure.
And I had never given her any indication that this wouldn't happen. And all of a sudden I was going to be a diplomat. And so she said, are you a spy? And I was speechless for a moment. And my brother came to the rescue. He said, nah, he wouldn't do something like that. Don't think about it. And so that settled this. She bought into that story. And so for the 2+ years that I spent in Berlin, I pretended that my office was the foreign ministry, a big building in Berlin, and where I would go to work every day. And then when I was moved to Moscow, the cover story was that I was going to be the vice attaché for science in the East German mission.
Okay, so getting back to the KGB training, this is one-on-one. You have somebody going through like the specialties, like you mentioned Morse code, decryption, encryption. What kind of equipment did they give you, or were you given any kind of equipment? You said photography. Did you have like a spy camera that you used, or how did that work?
No. See, one of the things that was stressed from early on, that all the equipment, to the extent possible, I was going to use should be available commercially. Because once you are outfitted with gadgets, and the KGB had a lot of gadgets. There used to be a KGB museum in Manhattan, and there were a lot of original gadgets that they used, but not illegals, because the moment counterintelligence searches through your belongings and finds a gadget, that's evidence. You're done.
Sure.
Okay, so it was everything. So I trained Morse code on a radio that they bought in West Germany. And when I went to the United States, I took one of those radios with me. The only specialty item I had one that I took with me was some copy paper to be used for secret writing. Now, this wasn't really copy paper. It was they went to, say, a store like Woolworths and bought a writing pad, and then some chemical wizards impregnated the first dozen pages with the trace of a chemical that allowed me to use that as contact paper to produce secret writing on a letter with an open text. That was the only one. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you wouldn't find it. In other words, that was quite safe.
Okay, so how did they train you mentally? How did they train you to be like mentally tough? Because obviously, you have to be physically tough for a job like this, to be, what you're doing.
I have to disappoint you. There was no training in that respect whatsoever. You see, and this is stuff that I found out by research. there are two interviews on record that were given by ex heads of the first directorate. The first directorate was espionage, and within the first directorate, it was Department S, that was for illegals. And one of those guys was the head of the illegals department, and he told the interviewer how they went about recruiting candidates for this kind of a job. And there were a number of character traits that had to be already clear. So like fearlessness, the ability to make decisions quickly. My favorite was well-controlled inclination for adventure.
Okay.
and being adapting to new situation very quickly, and on and on. And so they knew I had all of that already, that raw material.
Okay.
So I had
visions.
Mentally,
I had visions in my head of, you're in KGB training and they have you in an ice bath and you have to torture puppies, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's just to like make you mentally tough. But your childhood, that's why I brought it up, was a very tough childhood. So I mean, you weren't used to being pampered. Let's just say that.
I was toughened up mentally and physically during my childhood, and I think part of it is initial wiring, but
sure.
I grew up to become a stoic, and if I may say that, my favorite saying is shit happens and you just got to deal with it.
Right.
Okay. Wow. If you know that you're not going to fail, but God forbid you do fail, you get up, dust yourself off and go on.
Right. No feeling sorry for yourself.
Yep.
Okay. Now, how many languages did you have to learn? And what did that look like?
Just one. There was a requirement, I was told, that every illegal that they were sending out needed to learn one other language. And I was given a choice. Okay. So I said English. So, okay. So I pretty much started from scratch, I had English in high school, but, high school English was nothing. So I started with a tutor from scratch, and within 8-9 months, I had amassed enough vocabulary in my head, that I was able to read English novels without using a dictionary. And when my handler got wind of that, a light bulb went on in his head and said, oh, wait a minute, maybe I was originally supposed to go to West Germany. Maybe you would be the kind of guy we can send to the United States.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I was sent to Moscow on a brief trip, where I was interviewed by a Russian college professor who taught English, and an ex-American citizen. It was just like we talked for about an hour.
Yeah.
And then the committee that was making a decision, and I don't know, I just know there were some people in the background who I hadn't met in person. They asked the two ladies whether it was likely or possible that I might be able to speak English well enough without much of a discernible accent.
Mm-hmm.
And the Russian said she was thumbs down, and the American said, yeah, I think he can do it. Americans are a little more optimistic. So wishful thinking added a little weight, and so they decided to take me to Moscow for 2 years worth of highly intense English training, and a few other things that where they had better resources than they had in Berlin.
What did the intense English training look like? What was like a typical day of that?
Okay, so it wasn't a typical day. There was never a day when I didn't do English. So in the evening, I would listen to on shortwave to BBC London
Mm.
And during the day, I would read English novels mostly, but maybe also some newspapers. I increased my vocabulary. Twice a week, I met with the American lady, and we spent 2 hours together doing pronunciation exercises and just talking about America. And every evening, and this was at least for a year, I was highly disciplined. I had excellent study habits. So they gave me a phonetics tape
Mm.
where I would hear a word spoken and would repeat it out loud. And I did this over and over and over again, uh, which really did the trick. Uh, I'm not, I'm, I do have a slight accent, but I can hear it.
Sure.
But in New York, that wasn't a problem. New York is a city where there's all kinds of accents
Right.
and
It's a melting pot. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And
Yep.
and I had a real good explanation for the rare occasion that somebody says, "Well, Jack, you have a bit of an accent," and I would say, "Sure, I grew up bilingual. My mother was German."
Mm.
The birth certificate of Jack Barsky shows the maiden name of his mother to be Schwartz.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, and I threw myself at it.
So
With
how did you get the subtle nuances? How did you get the, like slang, that kind of thing? Not just
that
how did you
that
get
I
that?
didn't. No. See, and this fundamentally wasn't planned because let me tell you something. The folks that planned uh, out my entry in the United States, that sort of planned the preparation, didn't quite know what they were doing. That
Okay.
question you just asked did not occur to anybody. You can't learn slang and the kind of language that is spoken today talking with somebody who left the United States 20 years ago,
Sure.
and who probably never spoke slang to begin with, because that lady grew up sort of in the area where you sit right now in the
Mm.
Midwest.
Gotcha.
So this is how I acquired this, and this was very much by accident. I had to find a job, right? I had to start operating like an American, and the only job that seemed to be promising enough, I got hired as a bicycle messenger. And that was the kind of job where you made decent money because it was contract labor. and and I spent 2.5 years full time uh, at that job. And in between deliveries, I would sit in the office and I would listen to the guys.
Okay.
Those guys were like, pretty much street urchins, and they spoke the language that I hadn't learned in
So
Moscow.
so let me ask you this. We'll back up just a little bit. How did the KGB get you into America? What was your cover story? Like, how
Yeah.
did that happen?
Well, it had to start with a birth certificate, and the KGB was in the habit of stealing identities from young people from people that had died young.
Mm-hmm.
And in those days, it was possible for anybody to get a birth certificate of anybody, no
Oh,
questions asked.
wow.
So Jack Barsky, there was a KGB agent wandering in graveyards, and he found the gravestone. Jack Barsky, born November 13, 1944, died in 1955.
Mm.
He got the birth certificate, so the plan was I was going to become Jack Barsky. And then a number of agents, maybe only one or two in New York, would uh, walk around and find places and addresses where I had lived in New York, where I went to school, and where I also worked. Somehow they found, that was brilliant. They found the record of a chemical factory that eventually blew up.
Okay.
Okay, so you can't trace.
Did the
When I worked
KGB
for
blow
that
it up?
company, I worked for that company for a while. I didn't blow it up, but when it blew up, and then I wound up upstate New York on a farm for quite some time, because my cover story was that, I was suffering from migraine headaches, and I just wanted to get out of the city. So we worked for quite a while on that on this backstory, which was mostly mine. I took the information that the agents from the United States sent, and then put my imagination to work.
Sure.
What I did is I took a lot of people from my childhood with me, but I renamed them.
Okay.
So, for instance, my first grade teacher, uh, I took that lady with me. I could describe who she was and how she was and how wonderful she was, but I gave her a different name. And my best friend, I took all these people with me, so I had real people to talk about. I didn't have to make something up. And that's all I had.
Okay.
The backstory in my head and the birth certificate.
Right. So exactly how did you get into the United States? How did the KGB sneak you in?
Yeah,
how are you inserted?
So
okay.
It was a 3-week trip that took me from Moscow to Belgrade to Vienna to Rome to Madrid to Mexico City and eventually to Chicago.
Okay.
During that trip, I used 1, 2, 3 different passports, 2 West Germans, who were obviously forgeries.
Wow.
And one Canadian.
And
I entered the United States through Chicago O'Hare, using that Canadian passport. And within 2 days, I got rid of the Canadian passport and I became Jack Barsky.
Wow.
In those days, it was possible to live without any kind of identification. You could get a hotel room without an identification. You could get on a plane without identification.
Wow. Okay.
The country was wide open to people like me.
Okay. So you're in the country, you wind up in New York, you're a courier, a bicycle delivery person, and you're learning the geography of New York City. You have to know where you're going, and there was no GPS back then. And
yes, absolutely. Let me tell you something.
Sure.
I don't know if I wrote this in the book, but one of the prerequisites for becoming a really good spy was the ability to walk a lot.
Okay.
Because you have to get to know your playground as well as anybody. And year one, until I had the documentation that was needed to get a job, the first year I didn't work at all. So every day I would go out and take the subway to a stop and start walking around. And I got to know the city very well on foot. And then when I worked as a courier, I mean, I don't think there was anybody who knew Manhattan better than I did, including that the numbers on the buildings. That was my playground, and that knowledge comes in handy, particularly when you are going on surveillance discovery routes.
Sure. So we talked about like subtle nuances in language and that, you'd be in the bullpen or whatever, waiting for a delivery with the rest of the guys. Now there's very subtle things. Like one thing I picked up in your book was using a knife and fork. There's kind of a European way of doing it and an American way of doing it. And it's funny because when I cut, like, say, a steak, my knife is in my right hand, my fork is in my left hand, and I eat with my left hand then. And yes, I remember
this changed. No, this changed. Americans gotten more sophisticated. In those days, it was pretty much the rule that people would cut the meat and then put the knife down and use the fork with the right hand. Not anymore.
Well, it's funny because that sparked a memory in my brain, because I had dinner with my ex-wife's parents, like one of the first dinners, and unbeknownst to me, my ex-father-in-law, told my ex-wife, says, "Oh, he must be a Europeaner, because look how he's eating.
Right.
We taught you the exact opposite way. That's bad manners." Yeah, and it's like, oh, I didn't mean to offend anybody. That's just the way I was raised.
Show me how you count with your fingers. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. I just put them up.
Did you start with this one?
Yeah, it started with the index finger.
Guess what? German is like this: 1, 2, 3, and the KGB.
You start with a thumb.
The KGB did not know this, so that was a giveaway as well. There's a few other of those little quirks.
Oh, okay, cool. Now, you're talking about you had a handler. So you're in the United States. I assume you had a handler that you reported to on a regular basis. What did that look like?
No, that's a faulty assumption.
Okay, tell me how that worked.
My handler was set in Moscow. We're talking about the fellow who would guide the other guys that were intermediaries, but that had something to do with me. But the rule was, and I found this in one of those interviews, the rule was that illegals never ever would meet in person with another agent in the country where they operated.
Oh, okay. So how did you communicate?
The reason for that is, there's always this possibility that the counterpart, who was most likely a diplomat or at least somebody with a cover as a scientist or a journalist, that they might be known to be KGB and they might be followed, and that would pretty much blow up the identity of your undercover agent. We were way too valuable, not because they liked us so much, but because it took a lot of time and effort and money to train us and maintain us. So what you see, like for instance in the Americans, that when the illegals are meeting with their handler,
yes,
never happened. I did meet other agents, but in third countries.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes total sense. So how did you communicate and how did you get your assignments?
Yeah, so that was the awkward part of my being. I got my orders and answers to questions via shortwave Morse code every Thursday night at 9:15 sharp. There would be a radio transmission. Sometimes there was just a call signal, and then it would go beep beep beep, and that means nothing to tell you today.
Okay.
But I had to dial into my frequency every Thursday for 10 years at 9:15 in the evening. So, and this was all in numbers, digits that were double encrypted. There was the first level of encryption was the sophisticated one, where you do some manipulations with a set of numbers that were then used to either add to the numbers I received or subtract. And the resulting set of numbers then had a one-to-one relationship with letters. So that was the second part of the encryption decryption. That took quite a while, and it was not unusual that I would take until midnight to finally figure out what they had been sending me, because it just was very labor intensive. And for me to send information back was nothing but secret writing. I was allowed to send, I had 2 addresses to which I could send letters, regular letters. And I was limited to 1 letter to each address per month, and no more than 2 sheets of paper.
Now, what country would you be sending those to?
We had West Berlin, Austria, and some country in South America. I forgot.
Okay.
Which country that was.
Yeah, it wasn't KGB headquarters or anything. That wouldn't be very covert.
Oh, no. It would go to a third country where they would have, people that volunteered. They were probably paid volunteers for the KGB.
Mm-hmm.
They would get the letter and know what to do with it. They would then call a resident KGB agent for a meeting, hand this thing over, and from there it went into the diplomatic pouch, wound up in Moscow, where it would then be developed.
Okay.
Lengthy process.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So what kind of like missions would they send you on? What were you doing? Like what was a spy day looking like?
Boring as hell.
Yeah.
until I had a real job that I really liked, but that's maybe we'll talk about it later. But
Mm-hmm.
I received some training, I don't even know if you can call it training, but I was directed towards political intelligence. In other words, they would feed me magazines where, Western magazines where I could, inform myself what what the political scenery looked like in the United States. The whole, how NATO was strong and not strong. So anything that was in the public realm. So I had a background, and the plan was for me to actually get close to decision makers in the foreign policy realm, or at least influencers.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that plan actually was brilliant and would have enabled me to do exactly that. I was supposed to get U.S. documentation, including a passport. And once I got that passport, I would move to some German-speaking neutral country, that would be Switzerland or Austria.
Yeah.
And open up a business. And the KGB had really good experience in funneling money into businesses. Before you know it, within 2 years, I maybe have $10 million on account. I moved back to the United States. Now I have the money to introduce myself to groups and individuals that had a higher standing in society.
Sure.
Join a golf club where I knew maybe that people from the State Department played golf, something like that. Except it didn't work. But we made collectively, they and we made a mistake, and I was denied the passport.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay, and so now plan B was, now since I was already there, I had ID. I was a well-trained agent who said, okay, why don't you just, acquire a college degree and become a professional. Well, that was a 3-year detour.
Mm-hmm.
But after 3 years, I had a degree in computer systems, information technology, and I was hired as a programmer. Now, as a bike messenger, as a student, and as an entry-level programmer, for me to get close to foreign policy decision makers was next to impossible. On top of it, I didn't have the time. As a student, I was even working still part-time. I
Sure.
had no time. And then, and as a programmer, your time wasn't your own either, because we were on night calls and all kinds of things. So this just didn't work out. I did manage to send periodic reports on the attitude of Americans that I interacted with,
Mm-hmm.
to stuff that happened internationally. I think my reports may have been more valuable than what the Soviet diplomats sent to Moscow, because I guarantee you they read the New York Times, the Washington Post, and extracted some information, and bingo, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the USSR could not validate whether that information was actually accurate and valuable.
So to give this context, this was like at the height of the Cold War. This was,
yes.
what years 80s, were, yeah,
throughout the 80s.
So you were there before the wall was torn down, before the collapse
Correct.
of the USSR,
Correct.
and then obviously post. Now, you see on TV and in movies, spies that are kind of slinking around doing counterintelligence, wearing disguises and all that kind of, like, sunglasses and hats and
Yeah,
fake
yeah.
mustaches and wigs.
No,
What's the reality of that?
that's a total no-no. The first time somebody recognizes you as who you are when you're wearing a wig, you're busted.
Yeah, I would think so.
It works to some degree. Disguises work for the ones that are like chasing people like me. The surveillance team, for instance. When I trained in Moscow, the members of the surveillance team at least changed articles of clothing, or have a hat on or not a hat on. The CIA actually developed some very sophisticated disguises, but for an illegal, even the possession of that kind of stuff was a no-no. So no, we had to be as normal as all of your neighbors. There should not be any distinction between you and normal people.
So when you were spying, when you were, a KGB agent, I would imagine you're looking over your shoulder and, there's some
No,
counterintelligence going on. What did that look
no,
like? What
that's
did what did that
that's
look like?
another no-no,
Okay.
because that's a giveaway that you are, you know, you're looking for whether somebody's following you.
Mm-hmm.
So the SDR's, surveillance detection routes, had to be planned in such a way that whatever you do is normal behavior-wise, and that even excluded, when you think you come up with this great trick, you walk towards a glass display window of a department store, and you look at it acts as a mirror, and you can see who's following you.
Mm-hmm.
That was not allowed either.
Okay.
So the point being was that you had to go, and that's where knowledge of the city came in, was absolutely key. You had to find spots and means of transportation where at least one member of the surveillance team comes into sight normally. Like, you wait at a bus stop where there are normally not too many people waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just stand there and guarantee you there's one of these surveillance team members will be there with you, simply because if they lose sight of you, at that point you could be engaged in an operation. So somebody always needs to see what you're doing. And there's also places like department stores, and but my favorite was the Museum of Natural History.
Okay.
It's a great place to, for instance, do what a brush pass is, when you meet somebody and you hand them something in passing.
Mm-hmm.
Museum of Natural History in New York has a lot of staircases, and I sometimes have a problem when the German word pops in. I can't figure out.
Like staircases, hallways, like secluded
Hallways,
areas.
exactly. Hallways where there are not too many people. And
Mm.
you can, this is a museum. You can walk around, you can turn around. So that's how you can detect as to whether you are being followed or not, without giving surveillance detection proof that you're doing it.
Okay.
They can say, well, it looks like he's checking for surveillance, but it could not be proven in a court of law.
Now, were there any instances where you either picked up a package or dropped off a package? Obviously I'm assuming you were getting paid by the KGB while you were doing all this. So what did that look like?
Well, I got money supplied really only once, because I told you the first year I didn't work, so I needed shot in the arm. I needed money to
Sure. New York isn't cheap.
Just for another year, but once I had a job as a bike messenger, I was independent. I did not need any money, but we conducted 6, 7, or 8 dead drop operations during my 10 years. There was always one just prior to me traveling back to Moscow, and that happened 4 times.
Okay.
So because I needed a passport, right? Because
okay.
So
what would that look like? Like are you in a park and I'll let you tell it. Yeah, how
mostly parks. These were spots that I found out myself and then described in one of my letters with secret writing. Each dead drop has a spot where you place the container and 2 signal spots. The first signal spot is the signal is set by the person who drops the container, indicating the container is in place. So if you walk by there, by that signal spot, and there is no signal, you just go home. You don't even bother.
What would the signal be? What would the
Oh,
signal be?
We use chalk signals,
So you just put a piece
simple,
of like a chalk mark on a tree or a pole or something?
Yep, in passing, it, mostly horizontal chalk mark.
Okay.
And the other signal was set once the person, in this case it was me, has possession of the container. And the timing was pretty precise. Within 5 minutes, person 1 would pass by that signal spot, and God forbid there is no signal, he would have to go back and retrieve the container. Never happened. We all of the operations that we conducted were successful.
Okay. So you're doing this, that would be probably one of the more stressful things, I would think, because you don't want the FBI catching you in the act, that type of thing. And what would the self-talk be? What are you saying to yourself? Is like, okay, I'm going to make this, or any other kind of like stressful, like situation that you're in. What do you say to yourself?
So I did write about this in the book. There isn't much saying. I made myself into a robot, so to speak. I knew exactly what I had to do, and there were no other thoughts that were allowed to enter my brain. So I just it was very mechanical. I knew what was to be done, and I was focused. Laser. I had laser-like focus on doing what needed to be done to conduct and complete the operation.
Okay. Now, if things went south, were you trained when you're going through your training with a one-on-one handler? When you're going through your training, why would they tell you, okay, if you get snatched up by the FBI or something like that, what were your instructions?
Okay. The instructions, if I'm detained, the instructions was to initially, deny everything.
Okay.
Once it got to a point where I have reason to believe that no matter how much I deny, they already have evidence, proof. At that point, I was advised to ask for a representative of the East Germany, one of the East German diplomats, to speak with. What was coming after was not predictable. There was a good possibility that I would wind up in jail because I had no protection. I was told you don't have to worry about being tortured or anything like that.
Okay.
The Americans are quite civilized, and this is an exact quote. The fellow who talked with me about this, he said, "They might slap you around a little bit, but that's about it."
So you didn't have a cyanide capsule or anything like that?
No, I did not, and it was understood and given that eventually the Soviets would get me out of jail. It would take a while, but there was enough evidence of prior cases where they did exactly that. They would not leave their spies, their captured spies, in jail not necessarily because they liked us that much or they cared, but if it becomes known that the Soviet Union abandons their own agent, then nobody would want to do this anymore.
Yeah, that is very true. That
Right.
is very true. So when you're going through all this training, when with your handler, et cetera, the chances of you getting hooked up to a polygraph, a lie detector, it's foreseeable. Do they try to teach you how to defeat a polygraph?
No, absolutely not. It was not even discussed.
Okay.
And quite to extend this a little bit, I never had interaction with a psychologist. I was never given a psychological test, anything like that. That only happened once I was in the hands of the FBI. They made me take a lie detector test, and
Wow.
they gave me a battery of psych tests. But interestingly enough, psychology was pretty well developed in the Soviet Union. They did not care. It was all basically, common sense,
Mm-hmm.
and we trust that you will handle things the way they are best handled.
Wow.
Period.
Okay. Now, while all this is going on, you're a bike courier, then you go to college, then you get a job with MetLife Insurance. You're a computer person, and you're establishing
wizard.
Yeah, wizard, and you're establishing a foothold in America, and you're an American. You're doing everything that Americans do. Now, you had two families. You had one back in West in East Germany, and you had one in America at the same time, correct?
Yeah. I got married just prior to my departure to the United States. My East German wife knew what I was doing and where I was going, and she entered the marriage with her eyes wide open.
Okay.
I didn't discuss any details with her, but the KGB, and we had a child, a son,
mm-hmm.
and that created an anchor. If I have a family back in East Germany, the risk of defecting would be much smaller than if I had none.
Okay.
But I stumbled into something in the U.S. where I was looking for female companionship, and it turns out that the lady that I befriended was an illegal alien.
Okay.
And and she already had she needed to get somebody to marry her
for a green card kind of thing.
To become a citizen.
Sure.
And she tried it once, paid a guy some money, and then he didn't follow through.
Oh.
So very passive aggressively, indirectly, she asked me if I, could do that for her. And
she had no idea you're a KGB spy at
no,
this
of
point.
course not. And
Okay.
So I said, we got married for her to be, get a green card and eventually become a citizen, and that all succeeded very well. But the sneaky young lady also became pregnant.
Okay.
Which I understood much later was a pattern amongst. I'm only talking about the Caribbean because I know about that.
Mm-hmm.
How women try to capture a suitable man, a husband. It worked really well because I fell in love. More so, I was not in love with the mother of this child. I liked her a lot, but I wasn't in love.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her that once she gets her green card, we will get a divorce. Well, and as they say, and the Jews have a saying that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. The point is that she gave birth to this little girl who I watched growing up, and if you're a father, you know how men actually bond with children. It's not at birth. It's not when you take the baby home. but as you interact with a baby, she doesn't have to talk yet, but
Mm-hmm.
and so I fell in love with this girl, and that eventually made me quit the KGB, because I just when the time came to go back for good, I refused, and because I could not see myself leaving this girl. I had no such attachment to my son in Germany because I didn't see him. I didn't watch him grow up.
Mm. So yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you juggle? You have two identities, you have two families with children.
Yeah,
How the heck? I mean, I can barely keep birthdays straight in my own family. I couldn't even imagine doing that.
it's the C word, compartmentalization.
Wow.
And quite clearly, I have proof for myself that I had sort of a manufactured dual personality, because the German in me never dated while I was in Germany
Mm-hmm.
more than one lady at a time. Neither did the American. But here I am. I'm leaving. Uh, I'm leaving Germany when I was on vacation. I leave my German wife and son, and I come to the United States, and I joined my American family, and I felt not even an iota of guilt.
Wow. Okay. Dang. So everything comes to an end, and
Yeah.
your career as a KGB agent spying in America came to an end. What did that look like?
Well, I ended it. So
That doesn't
it,
happen usually, though, right? I mean, that's not like a job you
no,
quit.
it's quite unusual. It may have happened a lot when the Soviet Union fell apart
Sure.
and the KGB ceased to exist. There were a lot of stranded assets that people who were like me, stranded in another country, not knowing what to do.
Mm.
But anyway, in my case, it was in 1988 when the KGB somehow got spooked. Whatever happened, they were always very nervous and very concerned that for one of us to be busted. They were really unlike the Russians today. They didn't want anybody to go to jail, or knowing that there were people like illegals around.
Right.
And so somehow, for some reason, they thought I am being investigated by the FBI. So that triggered the emergency procedure.
Okay.
Started with a red dot at a signal spot. The red dot was part of the communication protocol. Red dot means get out of the country.
What
Just
was
don't
that
even
like?
ask.
Was that on a pole or something? Or
Yeah, it was on my way to work. One of the steel support beams that was supporting the elevated subway
hmm.
that went through part of Queens, the A train.
Yeah.
And then as I'm walking to get on a train, and I pass by that beam, and I see the red dot. I said, "Oh shit!"
It's go
I
time.
never expected that,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and mechanically, I kept on going. I was supposed to now maybe retrieve some money and get out of there. I was already living at that time with my American wife and our daughter. She was 18 months old at the time. But I kept on going to work because I had not yet determined how I could support Chelsea. Is her name.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if and when my task in the United States was going to end. And so I knew, sort of in the back of my mind, I had a little time to make up my mind, because there was always a chance that I was, ill, that I
Mm.
didn't see the spot,
Right.
uh, that, I, whatever, for whatever reason, the communication wasn't clear. Um, they that was on a Monday. On a Thursday, I listened to shortwave radio, and they explained it a little in detail. Says, we have reason to believe that your cover is about to be blown.
Okay.
Get out of the country. Retrieve your emergency documents. I had some emergency documents hidden in a park in New York, in just north of Manhattan in the Bronx. And I still had some time because the radio could have been broken.
Sure.
I could have been sick. I was sick one time. There was precedent when I had injured my right shoulder, and I couldn't write, and I couldn't even write down the numbers that they were transmitting short wave, and then I explained it to them. So there was always a chance. So they waited until within about 3 weeks, they sent one of their diplomats to talk to me on the subway station where they knew I would take the train. And so one day, it was in a December early morning, it was dark, sort of drizzly, it was a nasty day, and I'm standing there probably around 7-ish. There weren't too many riders yet on the platform, and this short guy in a black trench coat comes up to me from my right, and he whispers into my ear, "You got to come home, or else you're dead."
Okay.
All right. Well, that's an interesting communication.
That's pretty direct. Yeah.
Was it a threat? I can't say. Was it a misuse of the "you're dead"? The English language. Fundamentally, it's slang. My God, I'm dead. When you play a game, like
right.
You play tennis and you're down, whatever. As love 50 or whatever that is. Oh my God, I'm already dead. But in that context, to use the word "you're dead" is inappropriate. If he just wanted to warn me, he should have said, you got to go home. You're in grave danger.
It sounds more like a threat to me. That's just me. That's what it sounds like to me. Like, okay.
Well, I had to take it seriously, even though, as I told you, I was wired to be an optimist, and everything would always work out all right. But I managed. I did take precautions, and how do you get somebody dead? You got to wait for him, right? You don't go to the apartment where they live. You got to wait in the street. So I would go. I would vary the way I went to work. You use different subway stations. Use different paths to get to the station, and do it at different times.
Sure.
I did that for 3 months. Nothing happened, and the FBI didn't contact me. So I was in the clear. So at that point, I had successfully resigned from the KGB. And by the way, I did notify them why I did it, and this was everybody says it was the most brilliant thought I ever had. I told them that I had HIV/AIDS, and that worked like a charm.
I remember reading that in the book, and I'm thinking to myself, all the time and expense they put into that, they try to verify that somehow. I'm not exactly sure how, but just taking your word for it, it kind of surprises me.
How do you verify that?
I don't know, but boy, with all the money and training.
I'm just diagnosed with AIDS, right?
Yeah.
And I may not be sick yet, and I didn't tell him anything about him being in a hospital. First of all, I made the story quite credible because I traced this back to a lady that I had dated, whose basics I had reported to the KGB. And I told him that she was infected herself without knowing it.
Okay.
By an ex-boyfriend. Secondly, they had no reason to believe that I wasn't telling the truth because, first of all, I was known to have self-reported in situations where I was the only one who knew that I had made a mistake.
Mm.
So in other words, there was, I guarantee you, an entry somewhere in my file. This fellow is brutally honest.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Okay, so one, two, they didn't know that I had a child and a wife in the United States. If they had known
Oh,
that, they would have understood that that may be a reason for me to lie. All they
okay.
knew was, that all the good things that, for me would be back in Moscow, in East Germany, a wife, a child, a lot of dollars in my savings account,
Sure.
and a house that they promised me. I was held in high esteem. I had gotten the Order of the Red Banner, and so somehow for them to not believe it wasn't a possibility. They had to believe it.
Okay.
Why
So
would I not come back?
so you severed ties with the KGB, which probably historically not a whole lot of people have done under those circumstances, under your
No.
terms, more or less.
Yes, correct.
You do that, you have your life in the United States, you have a good job, you kept getting promotions, life is going good, and then something
Yeah.
happened when you got stopped by a state trooper. You want to kind of go through that a little bit?
Yeah. So, and there were a lot of things that happened in my life that got me to where I am today, talking to you, and I'm pretty much grateful for all of them. I'm grateful for the passport agent who denied me the passport. My life would have gone completely different. I'm fundamentally grateful to the woman who got pregnant with Chelsea, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful to the uh, for the guy who smuggled information out of the KGB archives that led the FBI to find me. And then I'm grateful to the FBI who treated me like a decent human being. And from the first moment they introduced themselves, uh, their plan was for them to have me cooperate. And
What was that first meeting? What did it look like? How did that
yeah,
happen?
that was just as unexpected as the KGB agent showing up on the subway platform. I'm on my way home. It's a Friday evening. I was commuting from New Jersey, about 40 miles into eastern Pennsylvania, and I had to cross the Delaware River. There was a toll bridge, and there was maybe a quarter or something like that. The toll was very low in those days. So I'm just putting my coin in, and as I'm trying to keep on going, a state trooper steps in front of the vehicle, and I'm all right. It's police, so I wind down the window and I ask him, uh, "What's the matter, officer?" He says, "Well, routine traffic control. Could you just pull over?" So I pulled over, and then he said, "Could you please step out of the vehicle?" So far, no problem. I had no inkling that something was going going to go haywire there. And as I'm standing there, there's another instant where somebody comes slowly towards me from the right. So I turn around, still no idea what's going on, and the guy has one of those ID cards when you just like flip it open. He
Mm-hmm.
showed it to me. I didn't even look at it. He said, "FBI, we would like to talk to you." The
Okay.
moment he did this, I knew that was trouble. It could have been police or whatever, but he said,
Right.
"FBI, we want to talk to you." And the the way your limbic brain responds to that kind of a situation, it moves all the blood to your muscles because the instinct would be to run.
Yeah, fight or
So
flight. Yep.
therefore, all the blood went out of my face and I became white as snow. That's what the FBI guy told me. So yeah, they put me in a vehicle. He told me, we're going to take you to a place and we'll talk to you. And he sat me down in the back seat, and there was a fellow sitting there who had a gun strapped to his ankle. So I knew this was serious. And I broke the ice. I asked first. I said, I asked, "Am I under arrest?" And the answer was interesting. The first agent who drove the vehicle said, "No, and this may not be the worst day in your life." So he opened, there was a little ray of hope coming through there. And then my instinct was, you want to break the ice. I didn't think it through. It was just like instinctive. I asked him, "So what took you so long?"
I love that. I laughed out loud when I heard that in the book. I literally laughed out loud. I'm like, "Oh, that's perfect."
It's validated by the FBI agent. He remembers it succinctly.
That's awesome.
And they didn't laugh out loud like you, but there was a bit of a chuckle because they couldn't help themselves. So that set the stage.
Sure.
And then when they took me to a motel where they had rented an entire wing.
Wow.
They put me in the middle room, and there were guards at either end. So there was no way that anybody could overhear or witness anything. So we spent about a couple of hours talking. I made it clear from the very first word that I said in that room. I said, I'm absolutely 100% going to cooperate with you, whatever it takes. I have a family. I have no, this is my life. So
sure.
Let's see what we can make of it. And so after about 2 hours, they let me go home.
Wow.
Not without a warning.
Okay.
They had another guy there who was in charge of, securing the area, so to speak. He said, "By the way, Mr. Barsky, if you think that you can run, forget about it. We got every intersection covered. You cannot leave." And I had no intention of leaving. I went home, and from that point on, I spent about 4 weeks in the twilight zone, uncertainty, what was going to happen.
Right.
Because there was no direct, explicit promise that I might not have to go to jail. That eventually happened after I passed a lie detector test. That's when the lead agent, who is now a friend of mine, Joe Riley, told me, FBI headquarters has determined that you will be allowed to stay and that there will be a path to citizenship. Whew.
Wow. So you went from, "Oh my God, my world is collapsing around me,"
yes,
to, "Hey, this ain't so bad. I quit the KGB and got out of the KGB, which is unusual to begin with, the way you did it. Now I'm busted by the FBI. My world is coming. I might be rotting in a federal prison somewhere for X amount of years."
Yes, with nobody having any incentive to get me out because the Soviet Union didn't exist anymore.
Right.
The wall had come down. East Germany didn't exist anymore. I would have been rotting.
You're just this guy that's in this cell block, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I wouldn't have, yes, this, and so what I was mostly worried about, believe it or not, was what would happen to my children, because
Sure.
I was afraid that they would kick my wife out of the country because her citizenship was obtained under false premises,
right?
And that the kids would be, become wardens of the state, and that was exactly not what I wanted when when I quit the KGB. So it was a very, very stressful time. They constantly.
Yeah. Now, do you know how long the FBI were surveilling you, keeping an eye on you?
I believe it was 3 years at least. And they also bought the house next door. They were very careful because
you had no idea.
They knew two things. They knew A, that I was an illegal, that I was sent by Moscow, and they knew B, that I was as well trained as anybody, because I had at that point been in the U.S. undetected for 19 years.
Wow.
Okay, so that's what they knew. So they didn't want to screw this up.
Sure.
If I was still operational, and they are too close in observing me, I would find out and run. Okay, so
Sure.
that's why it took them a long time. And there was some dissension within the ranks of the FBI as to whether I was still active or not, or whether I was still a sleeper to be woken up. They didn't know any of that. They had to figure this out by slow, careful observation.
Sure. Wow. That's amazing. It
Yeah,
truly is.
yeah.
So
I cost them a lot of money, and literally at one point, I was considered the number one counter-espionage case in the United States, and the reason being was that they were afraid I might be running somebody in the U.S. government, because we had the Robert Hansen and the Aldrich Ames case uh, uh, becoming public roughly at the same time.
gotcha. Now, the agent that was primarily doing the interrogation interview of you, that's Special Agent Riley, correct? Was that his name?
Correct. It's Joe Riley.
And you guys became friends.
Oh yes, very much so. I played a lot of golf with him while I still lived in Pennsylvania, several years. And recently, I was at his house not too long ago. We interviewed him for a podcast that is being released as we speak.
Now, isn't he also the godfather of
Yes.
one of your children?
Yes, he's the godfather to my last child. Her name is Trinity, and she's 11 years old. Yes.
That's awesome. Oh my God. It's so crazy how life just can change. Here you are, you're the spy for the KGB, you won these honors, for being a good communist, etc. Now you're raising your right hand and becoming a United States citizen.
Yeah, let me volunteer that I am 100% American. That is legally, that is intellectually, and emotionally. I'm an American with some German roots, but
right.
But way past being first generation. It feels like I've always lived here.
So, how did that feel? Like when you became an honest to goodness U.S. citizen, what were you feeling?
Oh, I finally, I went away from that swearing in ceremony, finally knowing that I have a home again.
So,
and I have a country that I can call my own.
Wow, that's an amazing story. It truly is. I know I've had you for a while here, Jack, and I really, really appreciate it. I have a Facebook group, and there were some questions in the Facebook group. Do we have time for a couple of questions?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so let's see here real quick. Let's see. Christopher Kratchman asks, what other things did the KGB do besides espionage? I thought that's all they did, but they do anything else?
Oh, the KGB, the majority of the KGB efforts were directed to spy on their own population, their own people, and
okay.
The Soviet state actually took its power from the intelligence apparatus, not the military. It was the KGB that suppressed any kind of dissent. The majority of the employees, quote unquote, of the KGB were not in the first directory, that not in espionage.
Gotcha. All right. What was the most Linda D. Rooney Card asks, what was the most difficult part about living in the U.S. and maintaining your cover? Intel drops or something more mundane like food or American slang?
Let me tell you what was the most difficult, and it was in the very beginning. Until I was comfortable, quote unquote, as an American, I had almost no social life. So we're talking about being alone, lonely for a good 3 years. When I entered college, it changed because I couldn't help it. I had to be with other people, bright people, young people.
Right.
But the place in New York, that was like the United Nations, so I wasn't very much in danger. I tell you what really got me through the lonely years was music.
Oh, okay.
I went through pretty much the entire basic repertoire of all classical music, and when I got home, I didn't watch TV. I played music.
Oh, okay. Very cool. So
Mm.
Richard Rybecki asks, did you know Putin? Is Putin still engaged with the Cold War against the US?
Well, of course he is engaged, but today, he's a mischief maker. But I don't want to get too much into current Russia.
Okay.
That would take another 2 hours.
Okay.
Putin was operative in East Germany. He spoke German. His station was located in the city of Dresden, and I lived and grew up about 70, 80 miles northeast of Dresden, but we did not cross paths.
Okay.
When he arrived in Dresden, I was already in the United States.
Okay. Anita Rogers is asking, what was your most dangerous, harrowing mission? And what is your take on geopolitics today?
Okay, the second question is unanswerable.
Okay, gotcha.
That requires an essay, but let me try it anyway. In a nutshell, the world is nowadays it's much more complex than it was during the Cold War. The Cold War was binary. It was the East and the West, and then there were third world countries, and China didn't play that much of a role. Now we got China, we got Russia, we got Iran, we got North Korea, and we got a NATO alliance that is not as strong as it used to be. It is, and at this point, the world is on a way to become a really dangerous place again.
Right.
So that's that. The first part of the question was,
what was your most dangerous, harrowing mission?
There was none.
Okay.
I'm
All
sorry.
Right. No, that's
I told
okay.
you before. Yeah, there was just not. I just never could. I could not embrace fear, and so when you talk dangerous,
Right.
I did what I had to do.
Okay.
Yeah, there were some moments that were where it was tight, like entering the United States, applying for a passport, and the travel that back to Moscow and going through various border controls, but none of them were really dangerous in a way that
Right.
I couldn't think of them as dangerous.
Right. All right. Let's see. What Flea Nelson Smith asks, which country got all the Stasi files in 1988? And were there former Stasi agents who identifies were never revealed to the public?
Okay. I think the files were pretty much stayed within the German state, and they're still there. Americans were trying to get a hold of, the CIA was trying to get a hold of them, but they weren't really successful. The reason I know this is that my best friend from high school, from college, worked at Stasi headquarters, and he was in charge of the forgery department. That's something that's not in the book because I didn't know it when I wrote the book.
Okay.
And he told me about an encounter with Americans, and he gave him the cold shoulder.
Okay, gotcha. Lois Page Simonson asks a couple of questions. We've already gone through this, like, how did you relay information back to the Soviet Union? What kind of technology was used? We did all that, and how you were allowed government citizenship if you cooperated with the U.S. government. That was, we didn't go too deep into that, but that was more or less the trade-off, correct?
Yeah, that was standard operational procedure. If you capture an agent from an enemy, you try to turn him. or you try to at least get them to cooperate, and in return, you let them live.
Right.
Many of my quote unquote colleagues wound up in the witness protection program. Well, they figured that would be harmful to my family and myself, and so I was allowed to keep on operating under the name of Jack Barsky.
Right. So one last question from the group. Lynn Hostetter Berger asked, how much at risk do you think our democracy is? That's a pretty big question.
I'm very much concerned that the risk is significant, and it actually accelerated rather quickly in the last 4 or 5 years. We are at this point pretty much ignoring the Constitution in the many things that we're doing, and this the split between the left and the right, and the animosity that we have now within the country, the fact that the glue that holds us together is rapidly disappearing, makes me very much concerned. When there's a generation of young people that are growing up and are being told how bad this country is, that is very dangerous, because as somebody who has perspective and knows the juxtaposition between a constitutional United States and all the other forms of government that we have out there, I truly appreciate what was built here, and I would very much hope we can keep it that way, so my children, particularly the young one, would have the opportunity to carve out her own path and have the freedom to make her own choices.
Absolutely. Okay. I know I've kept you a lot longer than we thought we would, but damn, this is a great conversation, Jack.
Do you pay overtime?
Yeah. We'll tell you what.
So can we record? Are we still being recorded?
Yeah, we're still being recorded.
Okay, so you want to ask me how what's going on, and how people can get in contact with me if they want.
Yeah, where can people find you, Jack, if they want? Well, not like literally, but they want to talk to you, or you have.
There's a website. I'm running a website. It's very simple, jackbarsky.com. And if you forget that, you just Google my name. There's pages upon pages, and including family pictures and all that. I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn. Of interest, you mentioned the name of my book, but of interest might be the podcast that is called The Agent. It is currently running on all major streaming audio.
It's just called The Agent?
The Agent, yes.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes. I'll put a link to that.
That's pretty much based on my life story, but it is not just me talking. It's a docudrama, so to speak, with lots of other voices to be heard, giving background on the KGB, giving background on the Cold War.
Great.
And people that were important in my life. Joe Riley will be talking there, and my daughter Chelsea will be talking. It's professionally made. It's of high quality and worth at least taking a peek.
Outstanding. Very good. All right. Well, Joe, again, thank you so much. I really appreciated this. This is a great conversation, and I wish you and your family nothing but good things, and have a great holiday coming up. Thanksgiving and Christmas. I hope Santa's good to you.
I don't need anything. I just need my girls, my wife, and my daughter to be happy, and that's enough of a present for me.
It certainly is. All right. Thanks again, Jack.
All right. Take care.